Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon all who seek. I am now looking at the cover of this book by Masaru Emoto. And Dr. Masaru Emoto is known for, as they say, his revolutionary work. We can read the back. The Hidden Messages in Water introduces the revolutionary work of internationally renowned Japanese scientist Masaru Emoto, who has discovered that molecules of water are affected by our thoughts, words, and feelings. Since humans and the earth are composed of water, his message is one of personal health, global environmental renewal, and a practical plan for peace that starts with each one of us. Now that I'm in Kuala Lumpur, I was recently told by the man behind the Superman Diet, a website that has articles written on well-being and detox in a very, very direct, strong, passionate language. And many people have been influenced by that particular author, writer, website, healer, and he led me to, or rather he told me when he found out that I was in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, to go to this particular doctor, Dr. Chan, who was the one that started him on his path to detox. So I do recommend all of you to check out the supermandiet.com when you have a chance, especially to read the article on detox, because most of us, all of us, have heavy metals in our body, some of us more than others, and this is the root of many illnesses that we have. Of course, there's other forms of toxicity, such as that comes from plastics, from pesticides, from electromagnetic frequency, radiation, from the devices that we're using all the time, and I have some symptoms of all of what I just mentioned. But, and yeah, I was tested, and they said that I have mercury. Dr. Chan said that I have mercury and lead, among other things. But that's not why we're here. I just wanted to mention this because when I went to Dr. Chan, I saw that he had this book, a book that I had heard of but had not actually read. And I wanted to share by reading this book as a gift to those who may be interested, and they may have a chance to then, if they're not able to read it or don't have it, they could still listen and perhaps gain some benefit. I don't want to start with the introduction, to be honest. I'd like to go straight into the prologue. When he wrote this book, he said in the beginning that more than 10 years have passed since I began taking photographs of frozen ice crystals. For years before that, I had conducted research into the measurement of wave fluctuations in water, but when I started learning about crystals, I discovered that water expresses itself in a vast variety of ways. I learned that these photographs of crystals are filled with much wisdom for us. In contrast to tap water, natural water displays a beautiful array of crystals, even more so when the natural water is exposed to beautiful music. And it goes on to continue about, later on in the book, he shows that it's not just music, but it's words and, words of all different types have different impacts. So a negative word will have a certain impact on the structure and formulation of the water crystals. But the intro is more him thanking people and explaining how the book became so popular in such a short period of time. So we'll go straight to the prologue. As you begin reading this book, I'd like to ask you to evaluate your life. More specifically, I'd like you to ask yourself if you are happy. Of course, your definition of happiness will depend upon who you are, but do you have a sense of peace in your heart, a feeling of security about your future, and a feeling of anticipation when you wake up in the morning? If we can call this happiness, then would you say that at this moment you are happy? I think I can safely say that not many people will be able to reply with a resounding yes. Most people are unable to say that their life is everything they had hoped it would be. What is it that causes us so much pain? What is going on in the world that prevents so many people from simply being happy? It seems to me that we are living in an age of chaos. Chaos describes a condition of confusion indicative of the unorganized matter that existed before the creation of the cosmos. Simply by going about our lives, we find ourselves worn out and fatigued. Newspapers and television bombard us with information, and at work, we face problems and misunderstandings. The sources of our problems seem numerous and overwhelming. This is likely to be a fact of life no matter where in the world we go. This tiny planet of ours is covered with economic conflict, domestic discord, ethnic prejudice, environmental distress, religious wars, and every other type of problem imaginable. I'm checking something. And every other problem imaginable. And all the bad news about people suffering, people enjoying the suffering, people getting richer, people getting poorer, the oppressed and the oppressors reaches us within a matter of seconds from the opposite side of the globe. Who, might we ask, is responsible for all this suffering? The world is becoming an ever more divided, estranged, and complicated place to live. We are already up to our necks in chaos, but the world's troubles seem to be getting deeper and deeper. One thing we all have in common is that we are looking for a way out. Everyone is looking for an answer, and it is an answer so simple and effective that it has heretofore eluded us. So what is the cause of all this chaos? What is at the center of it all? Whatever it is pushing the world away from harmony and towards discord. Perhaps this is an inevitable phenomenon. Though we all belong to the same species, if we live in different places and in different skin ways, the way we think is bound to be different. And to make matters worse, most people have difficulty accepting people are people, any solution proposed is certain to come up short. And so we are back where we started. All people on the globe invent stuff, and that is so simple that everyone can understand it. In fact, I have found the answer, and it is just this. The average human body is 70% water. We start out life being 99% water as fetuses. When we are born, we are 90% water, and by the time we reach adulthood, we are down to 70%. If we die of old age, we will probably be about 50% water. In other words, throughout our lives, we exist mostly as water. From a physical perspective, humans are water. When I realized this and started to look at the world from this perspective, I began to see things in a whole new way. First, I realized that this connection to water applies to all peoples. Therefore, what I am about to say applies to everyone, all over the world. I believe I am also starting to see the way that people should live their lives. So how can people live happy and healthy lives? The answer is to purify the water that makes up 70% of your body. Water in a river remains pure because it is moving. When water is trapped, when water becomes trapped, it dies. Therefore, water must constantly be circulated. The water or blood in the bodies of the sick is usually stagnant. When blood stops flowing, the body starts to decay, and if the blood in your brain stops, it can be life-threatening. So why does blood become stagnant? We can see this condition as the stagnation of emotions. Modern researchers have shown that the condition of the mind has a direct impact on the condition of the body. When you are living a full and enjoyable life, you feel better physically, and when your life is filled with struggles and sorrow, your body knows it. So when your emotions flow throughout your body, you feel a sense of joy, and you move towards physical health. Moving, changing, flowing, this is what life is all about. Now, part of me wants to reserve commentary and just read this. But it's interesting to me because I feel that it's the opposite way as well. That in some way, when we're feeling that mental stagnation, we need to sometimes bring about the physical because it does coexist. So just as he said, the physical body will be impacted by mental stagnation, but the mental stagnation can also be impacted by movement of the physical body. I just wanted to interject that point. If we consider that before we became human beings, we existed as water, we get closer to finding the answer to the basic question of what a human being is. If we have a clear understanding of water, we will better understand the human body and even unlock the mystery of why we were born and exist as we do. So just what is water? Your first answer might be that it is a life force. If we lose 50% of the water in our bodies, we can no longer maintain life. Water carried by blood and bodily fluids is the means by which nourishment is circulated throughout our bodies. This flow of water enables us to live active lives. Water serves as the transporter of energy throughout our body. This transport of energy is similar to a freight car that moves throughout the body. If the body is clogged and soiled, then the cargo in the freight car will also become filthy, and so it is essential that water always remain clean. More now than in the past, the medical community has begun to see water as a transporter of energy, and it is even being used in the treatment of illness. Homeopathy is one such field where the value of water is recognized. Homeopathy originated in Germany in the first half of the 19th century with the work of Samuel Hahnemann, 1791 to 1843, but its roots go back to the father of medicine, Hippocrates, 460 to 370. And we know that he learned, I believe, from ancient Egyptian teachings. So when we really look at the father, like where did he get his knowledge from? But that's a whole another discussion. Hippocrates, who wrote down many treatments similar to those promoted by homeopathy. In a word, these pioneers of medicine taught us to treat like with like, fight poison with poison. For example, if someone is suffering from lead poisoning, symptoms may be alleviated by drinking water with the minutest amount of lead in it, an amount ranging 1 part in 10 to the 12th power, 1 trillion, to 1 part in 10 to the 400th power. At this level, the matter no longer for practical purposes remains in the water, but the characteristics of the matter do remain, and this forms the medicine for treating lead poisoning. Homeopathy proposes that the greater the dilution, the greater the effectiveness. The logical conclusion is that the denser the poison in the body, the higher should be the dilution ratio. Another way to express this idea is that instead of the effect of the matter being used to get rid of the symptoms, the information copied to the water is being used to cancel out the information of the symptoms from the water. Wow, hold on. I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So I understand the general idea, but what they're saying, anyway, I probably should just continue to make sure usually there's a question that will pop up in my head and I'm thinking and I'm interacting with the text, and then I'll realize that, okay, if I keep reading, I'll understand. So water has the ability to copy and memorize information. We may also say that the water of the oceans has memories of the creatures that live in the ocean. The Earth's glaciers may well contain millions of years of the planet's history. Yeah, that part there, I have to go over that to make sure I'm understanding this idea that the information is copied to the water, and that is being used to cancel out the information of the symptoms from the poison. Yeah, that's a little deep. Water circulates around the globe, flowing through our bodies and spreading to the rest of the world. If we were capable of reading this information contained in the memory of water, we would read a story of epic proportions. To understand water is to understand the cosmos, the marvels of nature, and life itself. I have studied water for many years. The realization that water has the ability to copy information has changed my life. After making this discovery in America, I brought it back with me to Japan and have since used the information copying function of water to help people recover their health. At that time, however, doctors would not even consider the possibility that water by itself had healing capabilities. I was and am fully convinced that water is able to memorize and transport information, but this suggestion has been met with complete rejection by the medical community. In 1988, the French scientist Jacques Benveniste undertook an experiment to test the basic principles of homeopathy. He diluted a medicine with water to the point where the medicine was no longer detectable by clinical means, and then he discovered that this dilution had the same effect on patients as the undiluted medicine. A year after he submitted his results to the British scientific journal Nature, they were finally published, along with the comment that the results of the experiment were doubtful and without any physical proof. The hypothesis has remained buried and forgotten ever since. Whenever someone comes along with research and experiments that turn the scientific community on its ear, the reaction to one degree or another is usually the same. I long wondered if it might be possible to find physical evidence of the ability of water to memorize information. Might there be some way of seeing it with the physical eye? When your heart is open to possibilities, you start to notice small things that can lead to enormous discoveries. And see, just that sentence right there is why I'm reading this book out loud, because I started reading and I got to chapter 3, and you feel him. I feel this man. I feel his energy and his love, and and it's interesting because that's also how I felt with Dr. Chan when I met Dr. Chan, that his life was about sharing and caring, and it sounds so like I'm rhyming, but yeah, sharing, caring, and healing, and it comes from a place of love. It comes from a good place, and it's no coincidence that this is the man from whom I would borrow this book and feel similar feelings as I'm reading. And this is so true, that when your heart is open to possibilities, and we can take this in regards to other aspects of our life. Like if we think about our lives and we think about something that we are having a problem with, or something that we think, oh, I want this, but, and you keep adding the but. No, what do you want? What do you want in your life? And is your heart closed because you don't see the way? Because you don't see how it could happen. And so, because of that, your heart is closed. You allow your mind to close your heart. You allow your intellect and what you think, which is limited, to close almost infinite or innumerable pathways that through the heart could be opened. So again, when your heart is open to possibilities, you start to notice small things that can lead to enormous discoveries. And one day I casually opened a book to words that jumped off the page. No two snow crystals are exactly the same. Of course, I had learned this same thing in elementary school. The faces of all the snowflakes that have fallen on the earth for millions of years have all been different. However, I read the sentence as if it had a completely different meaning because my heart was open and receptive to its message. The next moment, I thought, if I freeze water and look at the crystals, each one will look totally unique. At that moment marked my first step on an adventure into a new and unexplored world. My plan was to freeze water and take pictures of the crystals. And again, let's just go back to how he said, because his heart was open and receptive to the message, he was able to read things and read something he had read before as a child, but now it had a completely different meaning. And this is why, going back to what I often will go back to, the Quran, and how Allah so many times says, do they not, like, are their hearts not closed? Are their hearts locked? Do they not, do they not use their hearts? Basically, I'm trying to think of a verse right now. I was just saying one to someone the other day, but now my mind is in this and it's not going to the other area. But there are verses in the Quran where Allah is showing us that we think with our hearts, we reflect with our hearts. There's an awareness that we can only have with our hearts specifically. So I find that really interesting. It's my nature not to want to sit on a fresh idea. I immediately asked a young researcher in my company to start experimenting, but this was a field that no one knew anything about. There was nothing to assure us that our efforts would eventually pay off. Oddly enough, I never doubted that they would. I knew with certainty that my hypothesis was correct and that the experiments would go well. I just knew it. I usually suffer from a critical shortage of perseverance, but this time I refused to give up. My first step was to lease an extremely accurate microscope and look at water frozen in a kitchen refrigerator. However, since the photographs were taken at room temperature, the ice would soon melt. It took us quite some time before we were able to get any photographs of crystals. Late each evening, I would take the young researcher to dinner and try to encourage him. I told him that I only expected him to do his best. After 2 months of experiments, we finally succeeded in getting one photograph. The water gave us a photograph of a beautiful hexagonal crystal. I was filled with excitement when the researcher came to me with the news. I now have a large walk-in refrigerator where the temperature is maintained at -5 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Fahrenheit, for experimenting, but it all started with that first photograph. Considering the method we used and what I know now, it was quite miraculous that we were able to get the first photograph at all. What you really know is possible in your heart is possible. We make it possible by our will. What we imagine in our minds becomes our world. That's just one of many things that I have learned from water. I mean, this just confirms so much that I've already been thinking about and I've already come to believe. The idea that we know, even from, my background, for those of you who haven't heard me before, I studied many years Arabic and Islamic studies. And while I'm not an expert, I have a lot of awareness in that world and from that perspective, which I love to share. And so even this idea of creating, we are taught that Allah creates. There's the creation that's only for God, or for the one that created everything. That's from nothing. Allah takes nothing and makes everything that we see. But we take from what is created and then make our own creation. So from our thoughts and from our awareness, we're able to influence what occurs. We're able to have an impact, and to some level, we're able to create. And I think of the narration again, where Allah says, "Ana inda dhani abdi bi." I am to my servant as he thinks of me. And so it doesn't mean that if you think something lowly or false, but meaning that what you think and what you expect from Allah is what you obtain and what you get. And what you expect is going to alter the way that you the way that you act, and the way that you react, and the way that you persevere. As Dr. Masaru Emoto mentioned, he had that certainty in his heart. He listened to his heart. His heart was open. He was shown something. He acted. He didn't wait. He acted right away. He followed through on it. And then what happened? And then he saw the first miracle. And it led to the understanding that we're going to also obtain through this book. The crystal photographs that I started taking proved to be extremely eloquent in expressing the world. I found within them a profound philosophy. Crystals emerge for only 20 or 30 seconds as the temperature rises and the ice starts to melt. The truths of the cosmos take shape and become visible, if only for a few moments. This short window of time gives us a glimpse into a world that is indeed magical. Let me explain how I go about taking photographs of crystals. I put 50 different types of water in 50 different Petri dishes. I used 100 during the first few years. I then freeze the dishes at -20 degrees Celsius or -4 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 hours in a freezer. The result is that surface tension forms drops of ice in the Petri dishes about 1 millimeter across. The crystal appears when you shine a light on the crown of the drop of ice. Of course, the result is never 50 similar crystals, and sometimes no crystals at all are formed. When we graphed the formation of the crystals, we realized that different water formed different crystals. Some of them were clearly similar, some were deformed, and in some types of water, no crystals at all formed. First, I looked at the crystals of tap water from different locations. The water of Tokyo was a disaster. Not a single complete crystal was formed. Tap water includes a dose of chlorine used to sanitize it, utterly destroying the structure found in natural water. However, within natural water, no matter where it came from, natural springs, underground rivers, glaciers, and the upper reaches of rivers, complete crystals formed. My efforts to photograph ice crystals and conduct research began to move ahead. Then one day the researcher, who was as caught up in the project as I, said something completely out of left field. Let's see what happens when we expose the water to music. I knew that it was possible for vibrations of music to have an effect on the water. I myself enjoy music immensely and had hopes of becoming a professional, and had even had hopes of becoming a professional musician as a child, and so I was all in favor of this off-the-wall experiment. At first, we had no idea what music we would use and under what conditions we would conduct the experiment. But after considerable trial and error, we reached the conclusion that the best method was probably the simplest. Put a bottle of water on a table between two speakers and expose it to a volume at which a person might normally listen to music. We would also need to use the same water that we had used in previous experiments. We first tried distilled water from a drugstore. The results astounded us. Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, with its bright and clear tones, resulted in beautiful and well-formed crystals. Mozart's 40th Symphony, a graceful prayer to beauty, created crystals that were delicate and elegant, and the crystals formed from the exposure to Chopin's Etude in E. I don't even know what that is. OP10, number 3, surprise us with their lovely detail. All the classical music that we exposed the water to resulted in well-formed crystals with distinct characteristics. In contrast, the water exposed to violent, heavy metal music resulted in fragmented and malformed crystals at best. But our experimenting didn't stop there. We next thought about what would happen if we wrote words or phrases like thank you and fool on pieces of paper and wrapped the paper around the bottles of water with the words facing in. It didn't seem logical for water to read the writing, understand the meaning, and change its form accordingly, but I knew from the experiment with music that strange things could happen. We felt as if we were explorers setting out on a journey through an unmapped jungle. The results of the experiments didn't disappoint us. Water exposed to thank you formed beautiful hexagonal crystals, but water exposed to the word fool produced crystals similar to the water exposed to heavy metal music, malformed and fragmented. Further experimenting showed that water exposed to positive expressions like let's do it created attractive, well-formed crystals, but the water exposed to negative expressions like do it barely formed any crystals at all. The lessons that we can learn from this expression has to do with the power of words. The vibration of good words has a positive effect on our world, whereas the vibration from negative words has the power to destroy. Learning about water is like an exploration to discover how the cosmos works, and the crystals revealed through water are like the portal into another dimension. As we continued with our experiments in taking photographs of crystals, we found that we were setting out to climb the stairs toward an understanding of the profound truths of the cosmos. I particularly remember one photograph. It was the most beautiful and delicate crystal that I had so far seen, formed by being exposed to the words love and gratitude. It was as if the water had rejoiced and celebrated by creating a flower in bloom. It was so beautiful that I can say that it actually changed my life from that moment on. Water has taught me the delicacy of the human soul and the impact that love and gratitude can have on the world. In Japan, it is said that words of the soul reside in a spirit called kotodama, or the spirit of words, and the act of speaking words has the power to change the world. We all know that words have an enormous influence on the way we think and feel, and that things generally go more smoothly when positive words are used. However, up until now, we have never been able to physically see the effect of positive words. Words are an expression of the soul, and the condition of our soul is very likely to have an enormous impact on the water that composes as much as 70% of our bodies, and this impact will in no small way affect our bodies. People who are in good health are generally in good spirits. Ideally, a healthy spirit most comfortably resides in a healthy body. Out of desire to help as many people as possible remain or become healthy, I have worked for years taking care of the sick, and the more afflicted people that I see, the more I become convinced that illness is not an individual problem, but a result of the deformation of society as a whole. Unless something is done about the deformed world that we live in, and unless we can heal the wounded soul, the number of people suffering from physical illnesses will not decline. So what are the deformities of the world? Just want to adjust. So what are the deformities of the world? These are the deformities of the soul, and such deformities have an impact on the cosmos itself. Just as a drop in a pond creates a ripple that spreads out endlessly, the deformity of even one soul spreads throughout the world, resulting in global deformities. Wow. This makes me right away think of the narration where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that the ummah is as one body, that the Muslims together are as one body, and that when one part is ill, that the other part will feel it. Like if one is in pain or ill or disease, that the other one will feel it. And so there's that interconnectivity. And in that sense, it is like that for all of humanity. That when part of us suffers, it does ripple out. When part of us is diseased, all of us are impacted. All of us are impacted. But all is not lost. There is hope. There is salvation, and it's called love and gratitude. The earth is searching. It wants to be beautiful. It wants to be the most beautiful that it can be. Earlier I said that we could define the human being as water. I am quite certain that the water in the people who look at the photographs of crystals undergoes some form of change. And I have found the most beautiful crystal of all, the one created by love and gratitude. This is supposedly what all the world's religions are founded on. And if that were true, there would be no need for laws. You already know the answer. Love and gratitude are the words that must serve as the guide for the world. Water teaches in a very clear way how we must live our lives. The story of water reaches from every individual cell to encompass the entire cosmos. I hope that you will feel the same anticipation and excitement that I felt as I discovered the unfolding of this drama. I think the issue, I understand what he's saying, and I think the issue is that why there is a need for law is because there are other forces at work that move us away from the ultimate love and the ultimate gratitude, which from my perspective is from and for the one who created us. And so as we move away from that, or we forget that, we see that lawlessness does happen, or that certain acts of depravity and degradation, they, like the crystals he mentioned, exposed, they're not formed properly. And so something has to come to purify that water, to purify us, so that we can then be able to meet our highest potential. And so yeah, when it's interesting what he's saying, because he's mentioning that love and gratitude are enough, right, to restore us. Love and gratitude help these crystals to form, these beautiful crystals to form, and he's saying we are like that water. But don't we need laws to keep the water pure? Because he said that if it was tainted, if it was water that was mixed with chlorine, if it was water that was mixed with crystals, if it was water that was from the city, like the polluted water, he said it didn't reach the highest potential. It didn't make those crystals. So if we are the same, and we're saying that water in and of itself look at how we've destroyed it, then that means we need laws. Like, just like we need laws to govern and regulate who can dump what in water, who can build a pipeline here or there that we know is going to taint the water, so we need those laws. So similarly with us, we also do need laws. So I see a bit of a contradiction in that statement, to be honest, because of him saying that we are like that water. So very interesting. And yeah, I'm enjoying reading it out loud and interacting with it and playing around with it a little more than I did when I was reading it silently. So if any of this resonates with you and you want to share your ideas about what you heard, feel free to leave some comments. And that's it for now. The Hidden Messages in Water, Masaru Emoto. We just read the introduction, or rather the prologue. Peace and blessings of Allah to all who seek it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.